Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Haba. We're continuing in Mishna Berura Daf Hashavua. We're learning Siman Kuf Beis. Siman Kuf Beis. Shaloi lahafsik keneged hamispalel. Not to interrupt opposite one who's davening. Don't pass by someone who's davening. Says the Mechaber, Asur leishev b'toich arba amay shel mispalel. It is prohibited to sit within 4 cubits of someone who is davening. Bein milafanav, whether in front of the guy, bein minat stadim, or on the side. The guy next to you in shul is still davening Shemone Esrei. You finished. Well, you have an opportunity to stretch your legs because you can't sit down. Ubein milachrav, or behind him. Sarach laharchik arba amas. You have to distance yourself 4 amas. So we're not talking about just passing by. Many people are careful. They don't take 3 steps into a guy who is davening Shemone Esrei behind them. Okay, that's good. But besides that, you're not allowed to sit down. You can't be seated within 4 amos of someone davening Shemone Esrei. Ve'im if the person is not davening Shemone Esrei, but he's involved in one of the tikkunim of tefillos, even if he's saying Perek Ezra Mekaman in Sarach Laharchik, you don't have to distance. What does that mean? If the person who wants to sit down is being oisik in things that are mitukunei hatfilos, even in karbanos, he's allowed to sit down. So in other words, the din of not sitting is just sitting idly. But if you're going to sit and daven, you're allowed to sit within daled amos of someone davening Shemone Esrei, even if you're just saying karbanos. But it sounds like if you're learning, then you're not allowed to sit. V'yesh mater. There are those who are mater. There's a Chumash hadashin ba'oisik b'Torah afal pi she'eno mitikunei hatfilos. Even if it's not one of the fixings of tefillah, meaning one of the components of davening. V'yesh mishamer. There are those who say dahani milim min atzad. This is all on the side. Aval kenegdai, but opposite him, afilu kimlai einav, anywhere in his eye shot, asar afilu oisik b'kriya shema, you're not allowed to be sitting, even if you're saying Shema. And this is the opinion of the Sefer Oyhel Moyed. I can't say I ever heard of the Sefer Oyhel Moyed, but it seems like it's one of the Rishonim. Sefer Oyhel Moyed. You ever hear of that? So the Sefer Oyhel Moyed holds that you're not allowed to sit within eye shot of somebody who's davening Shemone Esrei. Let's see. The Chida says there's a sefer called Oyhel Moed, Sefer Piskei Dinim Kadmoin Maskiroi Maran HaKadosh L'famim Bebeis Yosef. Sometimes the Beis Yosef quotes this early sefer of Piskei Dinim. Fine. Says the Mishna Berura, Asar leishev, v'gam smicha asar. Not only you're not allowed to sit. Okay, so we have 3 opinions. The first opinion is you cannot sit within 4 amos of someone davening, in front, in back, on the sides. And if you're saying any davening at all, there's no restriction. And there are those who say even if you're learning, there are no restrictions. And then there's the third opinion that there are only no restrictions on the side, but opposite him, kimloi einav. Says Mishna Berura, asar leishev, v'gam smicha, so you're not even allowed to lean. Ach smicha b'mixas, leaning partially. She'em yinato yuchal amed, that if you take away the thing you're leaning on, you could still stand. Yesh lahaka b'makam adchak, you could be lenient in a difficult situation. Okay, b'toich arba amos, va'afilu kishehu yoshev ba'alaksain dai ba'arba amos, v'loi ba'inan ha'arba amos, even if when you're sitting in an angle, it's enough to have 4 amos. In other words, from the epicenter of the guy davening, you draw a 4 amos circle. not a 4 amos square, and then the angles are going to be, according to the Pythagorean theorem, longer than 4 amos. You understand? In other words, the question is, let's say the guy, do you make a box around the guy? So then by the angles, it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be the square, 4 squared plus 4 squared. 6, it will be the square root of 32. What? 5.6?
5 and 3/5, because our last sign is 1 and
5.6, right?
It's 1 1/5 bigger from Sukkah. 1 and 1/5 bigger.
1 and 1/5?
1 and 2/5.
1 and 2/5? 5.6. It's the square root of 32. Whatever the square root of 32 is. So, you don't need the square root of 32. It's enough to have 4 amos in the angles. If the person davening is on one side of furniture which is set, 10 tvachim tall and 4 tvachim wide, you're allowed to sit on the other side. There's a hefsik rishus. So I guess, let's say a table is usually 10 tvachim tall and 4 tvachim wide. That would be a mafsik rishus. Aval lavar mitzad hasheni. So in other words, you could sit down. But to pass by, to walk by, if it's not so tall that the guy, that it doesn't block his vision, also you can pass by. V'chein pasak ba'alachas ketanos. V'chein mitzadeid ha'prima gadim b'simen tzadi sivkatan hey sheyesh lahachmer lavar ba'alamra neged ha'mispalel av shehu rishus b'fnei atzmai. The prima gadim simen tzadi is machmer to pass in a almera. I don't know what that is. You're in some elevated platform, even though it's rishus by itself. V'leishev, but this is mater b'rishus acheres. You're allowed to sit in another rishus. Afilu b'toich arba amos, even within 4 amos. What about if there's a mechitza of glass? The Chai Adam says you could sit, but you can't pass by because he could still see you, and it's mevatel his kavana. Okay. Shel mispalel, don't sit within the 4 amos of someone who's davening. Let's say he's not davening. Let's say he's in Elokai Netzar, and the guy is saying personal bakashas, and you listen in. He has a list of all his stocks, and he's saying them. He's saying NASDAQ. He's listing all his bonds. So come on, I have to sit. I have to stand because this guy is being mispalel for all of his money. So the answer is, yeah, you do. You're stuck because he didn't take 3 steps back. The din is you can't sit within 4 cubits and you can't pass by. Now, also regarding the din of, let's say he took 3 steps back. So there's no isser of lavar k'neged ha'mispalel, but some say he still is not finished because he needs to take 3 steps forward. So some are still makbid not to pass before the guy where he took the 3 steps back until he takes the 3 steps forward. Okay. So the first day is you can't sit within 4 amos of some davening. However, then the Mechaber brought the opinion of Tosfos and the Rosh that if you're involved in tikunei tfilos, is permitted, even if you're saying Ezel Makamen, Vuadinim Oisik Beprakim B'Mincha B'Shabbos. Let's say you're learning Perkei Avos, Gam Ke Mutter Leisha B'Tzara Mispala. That's also Mitikunei Atfila. What if I'm listening to Chazaras Hashatz like a good boy? I'm not learning. Yeah? Is that also Mitikunei Tfila? No. Why? Because it has to be nicker that you're davening. Nicker you're davening is you're saying something. But if you're just listening, so then it's not nicker, you're oisek in tefillah, Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, and you wouldn't be allowed to sit. Can we argue and say if the guy is listening carefully and he's saying Baruch Baruch Shemai Amen, isn't that nicker that he's oisek b'tikunei tefillah? Later on in Siman Kuf Chav Dalet of Katan Chav, the Dirshu says it's mashma that listening to Chazas Hashatz is not koisek b'tefillah, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky explains because it's not so nicker. Weiter. There are those who matter if you're oisek b'Torah. Why? You know when you're not to sit next to someone who is davening if you're sitting idly. It looks like you don't want to accept upon yourself the yoke of heaven. This is the reason the Torah and the Beis Yosef brings. The Taz says a little differently. He says the Arba Amos of someone who's mispalel has a din of Admas Kodesh, and anyone who's sitting and is not oisek B'davar kadosh, it's like he's showing there's no kedusha there. So if you're learning, that's also okay. So avok shu yoshev oisek b'Torah harehu k'makabel of malchus shamayim. By the way, I would add, it depends how he's learning. If he's learning there silently, it can't be better than Chazar Sashatz. L'chara, he has to be saying the words. Look in the Achroinim that you should, if you're learning, you should not be lenient. Only if you're davening. Only if you're davening. Learning would not cut it.
But if you're quiet by learning, but you're looking at a safer, people realize you're learning.
I don't know. What about, you mean because by Chazar Sashatz you're just daydreaming as opposed to by learning? Let's see.
Maybe if you're looking in a sitter, it makes a difference too.
I don't know. Imloi b'makam hadchak, unless it's makam hadchak, then you could learn. Uvela'achrav nearly shein lachmer. And if you're behind the guy, then definitely you don't have to be machmer. Ba'oisek b'Torah. Only if you are saying the words. If you're just thinking the Torah, then it won't work. The Dirshu brings from the Makar Chayim that if you're looking in a sefer, like Reb Nosson said, then there's no chshad because it's clear that you're learning. Now, here's the zach. According to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, if you look into a sefer and you don't say the words, you're not mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. You know that shita. You know the shita of the Shulchan Aruch Harav is that you're only mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah if you say the words. So he says, well, what if I'm learning b'chavrusa or I'm learning at a shiur? So he says shoymea ka'oina, which is a big problem with Zoom, because shoymea ka'oina cannot work on Zoom. Because you're not actually hearing my voice. You're hearing the voice, which is translated into electrical impulses and then reconfigured to make noise on your end. There's no way you could say Shemei Ka'ina on electric equipment. Rav Shlomo Zalman vehemently disagrees with Shulchan Aruch Harav. He says there's no way you're not Yotzei in the midst of Talmud Torah. And the reason why if you learn with Chavrusa, you're Yotzei, it's not because of Shemei Ka'ina, it's at the Tzura of Talmud Torah. But I'm just saying, according to Shulchan Aruch Harav, even if you're looking in a sefer, you still can't sit. You know why? Because you're not actually being mekayim in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which, by the way, is something to think about. Really, when a person learns, they should try to say the words as much as possible. Or you could say, well, maybe even though you're not mekayim in the mitzvah, but it doesn't look like you're rejecting Malchus Shamayim, because at the end of the day, I'm looking in a sefer. Okay, weiter. Va'afilu be'inyanei tikunei tefillos, even if you're involved in davening, if you're not saying the words, it's not going to allow you to sit. They're going to be choshid you she'ein makabel of malchus shamayim. What if I'm oisek in a mitzvah? I'm making the seating chart for Rosh Hashanah. Could I sit? No. Only davening and learning. Okay. Now the third opinion is that the allowance to sit if you're davening and learning is only on the side, but not opposite. Why? If you're in front of the guy, he looks like he's bowing down to you. So the Dirshu says this implies there's an issue even if you're behind him. Somehow it could be construed that he's bowing down to you. I don't get that. But l'chayra, it should be only if he's behind you. According to this, you're not allowed to sit, but you're allowed to stand. Not sure why you're allowed to stand. Maybe he's bowing down to you. Even within 4 amos. Could be he would hold that you're not even allowed to stand, because by doing so it's mevatel the kavanah. And you're not allowed to stand in front of him according to the third opinion, even if you're oisek in Torah or in Tefillah, or even in Kriyas Shema. Perish hayoshev neged hamispalel oisek b'Kriyas Shema. The guy who is sitting opposite the person davening is saying Shema. I'm Pri Chadash a pasuk kedei kamaisa. Pri Chadash paskins halach l'maisa like the first opinion. The ein chilek bein malfanav bein menat stadim. There's no difference between in front and to the side. If you're davening, you could sit. If you're learning, there's even a yesh misha heter, and the achronim say not to follow that. Ushari achronim kasu shetov lahachmer ka yesh misha omer. Other achronim say you should be machmer like the yesh misha omer, meaning you should be machmer not to sit opposite someone who's davening, even if Shemone Esrei, even if you're davening. So Lamaisa, the Achronim say to follow this Yesh Misha Omer. So the Achronim seem to be machmer like both opinions. You follow the first opinion that you can only sit in the vicinity of someone davening if you're davening something, and like the third opinion, that's only on the side, but not directly opposite him. To stand outside of 4 amos, there's no reason to be machmer. Maybe even within 4 amos, where you'd be allowed to stand, b'chanal b'sivkatan ches. So you would be allowed to stand even within 4 amos. The issue is only sitting. Okay, Rabbi, so we'll hold it over here. I wish everyone a great day. Kol tov, bracha v'atzlacha.